Welcome back to the project, and this episode we'll be installing FreeBSD 13. Now I already created the boot media on a USB key and I have it inserted, and we're actually watching the boot process through the Intelligent Platform Management interface, which has a built-in KVM which allows us to view and control the machine remotely. I have sped the boot process up because it is slow. So here we are greeted by the FreeBSD boot. I'm pretty sure it'll be in the installer. Now it's pretty basic, straightforward installer. We're not going to go into every option or into in depth. And so the first thing we do is get the Keymaps Selection. And in Australia we don't have our own keymap, we just use the US one. I'm just using a very simple host name. I haven't bothered with a fully qualified domain name, but if I'm going to use one in the future, I can change it later down the track. It's not a problem. And we're going to go for a very minimal install. I don't need the kernel debugging or the 32-bit capability, and I can add the ports in the source tree later. The FreeBSD handbook is very detailed on how you can do that manually, and I do suggest you read it up. Now we can use UFS or ZFS. In this instance we're going to use ZFS. By default they use a stripe, which is like a RAID 0, but we're going to change it to a mirror, and we're going to use the two drives that we installed in the case. Now you can change the pool name to whatever you like if you don't like zroot. Zroot is the default of most FreeBSD installations, but you can change it to whatever you like. And in this instance we called it zboot mirror. Again, you can change it to what you want it to be. Now we're not going to bother with any encryption, but for what our needs is, it's fine. But if I was putting this on a virtual private server on the web, holding sensitive data, it probably would be a good idea to look at encryption. And here we are, we're going to destroy the contents of this, which is part and parcel, and the installation proceeds. And boom, something went wrong. This is unusual. The system reset itself. And one of the possible faults will actually show up later, and I'll explain that a bit more at the end of this video. As you see, the system's trying to boot off the two drives, but it can't find the bootloader. The install's definitely failed. So we will try again. Now, because we're running through a KVM, we can't actually use Control to delete on the keyboard. So we'll have to actually use the get the KVM to send that key combination to the machine for us. Again, speed the boot process up, because it is slow. But this time around we're going to be hitting the delete key to try and get into the BIOS, because we need to tell it to actually start off the USB key. So back in the BIOS, go to the boot. Now you can see it's trying to start off the hard disk, but the hard disk is no bootloader installed. But this time around we're going to actually try UEFI. Probably one option I should have used in the first place. So we change that boot option and we go and save the changes, and again we'll restart. Again, I'll speed this process up because it is slow. All servers and workstations are like this. And we should be greeted, yep, and here we're greeted with the FreeBSD UEFI bootloader. It does look a lot nicer. It is running in 800 by 600 versus 640 by 480, I think. And I think it's using maybe 16-bit color too. So the the graphics looks nicer versus the old BIOS legacy option. We're just going to go through the install using much the same options as we've done before. Again, the same key map. Again, we're just going to use a basic name. We're going to just go for a basic setup. Go ZFS, we're going to again reset up the boot drives with a two-way mirror using the two drives we installed. This time around I didn't bother with changing the full name, just me being lazy. Have a look at the options again. Again, it's warning us that it's going to wipe the disk, and now it's extracting it's copying over the base files. And looks like it's going to let us proceed. Success. Despite what was going on, FreeBSD has been remarkably stable throughout the whole thing, which is a testament. So here we are, we're going to enter a password for the root user or the super user account. Now you should use a very strong password, but be warned, don't forget it. You'll need it. And here FreeBSD's detected the two onboard 10 gigabit Ethernet interfaces. We'll set up only the one at the moment because we're only using one. Down the track you can pair them and do a lot of different options, but you do need the network switches to support whatever you're doing. We're just going to use IP4. We're not going to use DHCP, we're going to use a statically assigned address, which means now these settings will change depending on your network setup. Not all networks are the same. And the default router, I've just got one router, so let's set that one address, that'll be fine. Again, these settings will vary depending on your network. I was checking something. Now we're not going to use Ep6. I'll probably set it up down the track when I learn more about it. Now this is where you set up your resolve configuration, or when to change. With FreeBSD we'll know who to talk to resolve a web address into an IP address. The search field I just left empty. I wasn't too sure what I was going to use there, but in the DNS number 1, I've just used my router because it uses a resolver setup itself, and then I just used a Google generic name server. Now the system's going to be in local. We're not going to use UTC, so we're going to select no. If you're not sure, just go to no. I'm in Western Australia, so we need to go to Australia, and then Western Australia most areas. Unofficially, Western Australia does have a second time zone. Now we check the date and time. Now these are the services we want starting at boot. And yes, I do now PowerD, and for good reason. More on later. Now this is your system hardening options. Now if you're setting up a server, it's probably good practice to enable all of them. And then you can go into I believe the loader conf later to actually disable or comment out the ones you don't want if they're causing you issues. Here we create the user account, so I create one for myself. Now I did goof here. I tried to use a comma to try and do multiple groups at the same time. Didn't work. You need will if you're going to use sudo or do as or those. So you don't have to use the super user account to do certain tasks. And operator will actually allow you to do things like shut down the machine. Being a server, it's not actually important that to have the user in the operator account, because by rights if you're going to shut the machine down, you probably need to know how to log into the super user to do it anyway. Once we're all happy with all the settings, we can apply all the settings. Now you can go back and change anything in it. in that screen that you missed. But we're happy. We don't want to go into the console, the shell, so we'll just reboot. So when this was shutting down, what I did was just physically remove the USB key. Save me going back into the BIOS. The BIOS will try and boot from the next available boot media, which should be the hard drives, if this was all successful. Again, sped this up so we're not waiting half an hour. And success, we are greeted by the FreeBSD boot screen. Now for some reason the KVM didn't scale. And the login, you can't see it, I had to scroll. So we log in. So we switch to the super user account, so by default SU or switch user will go to root. And we need to be in the super user account to do the FreeBSD update. So we issue the fetch and install command. So it's gone out, it's obviously our network settings are right, so it's found one of the FreeBSD update servers. It's downloaded the data it needs, and now expect the system, and now it's downloading the patch files. Now this is where we get something show up on the screen. Poof. That is not the FreeBSD update programs text. That was actually an error, and I'll explain what that error was later on. So these are a list of all the files that are going to get updated, and we're done. But if you do uname-a will show you all the details of the system running system. And in this case, we're still running threading release, patch set 0. So to get the patch set being used, applied, we need to reboot. Again, speed up the boot process, so not waiting forever and a day. The SAT controller is still running in IR mode, and we'll change that later. Now the actual UEFI boot's running in 1600 by 900. That's probably why the KVM is not scaling properly, because it's bigger than the browser window. So we log in. Now this is one of running into a bit of the oddities about using a web-based KVM. They can be a bit funny sometimes. When it does this sort of stuff, you're better off actually waiting, walk away, come back, let it sort of settle itself down, and then it works pretty good. Now it's settled down, I was able to log in, and we can see we're running 13 release patch level 7, which is the current one as at the time of this recording. And that's all it for this video. Now, a bit of explanation. That little message we saw is actually an Ecc error, or more importantly, a memory error message generated by the CPU, as the controller is actually on board. And the FreeBSD kernel is obviously passing that message to a console, so we can actually see what's going on. That is probably one of the reasons why the system reset on the first install attempt, because it never reset it again. But as I was using this system more and more after the video was recorded, these messages kept popping up. So after a bit of searching, I found an old post on the FreeBSD forums with very much the same error, just talking about the very error messages I was getting. Even though it's generated by, I think it's a cache an issue, a faulty cache in the CPU package could be a fault, but that particular error message is actually referring to the memory modules themselves. Ooh. I just spent a good couple $100 on memory moles, and one of them could be faulty. The suggestion was to swap the positions of the modules, which is easy in our case. There's only 2. And if the fault's with the modules, one of the modules, the address of the faulty module will change. Couldn't hurt. So we shut the machine down, powered it off, swapped the modules around, booted it up. Until this date, the error message has not presented itself. So, in the end of the day, I'm hoping that just a bad contact, one of the modules, may have not just been seated perfectly home, and swapping the modules has reseated them. But the system has been very stable, even when these messages were appearing. So we'll watch this space. As all, thank you for watching, and in future videos we'll set up when the drives arrive, we'll set up the storage pool, and we'll document that process from start to finish. But until then, thank you very much and have a nice day.